Hi, everybody. My name's Emma. This is my story. It's about making mistakes. Well, we all make mistakes, don't we? We have delusions in ourselves and people and in our values. My story is also about understanding yourself, because if you do, you'll never betray yourself. Well, I guess it all started with my new foster family. Mr. and Mrs. Smith adopted me. They also had 3 charming kids who were adopted, just like me. But in fact, this story started much earlier, from the moment I understood myself and my life. When I realized whom I was and where I was, I had a plan in my head. Well, I was always a smart girl. I was too young when I learned to read and understand smart books. I also liked to listen to other people. Thus, step by step, using my cunning, childish, naive face and some manipulations, I became kinda boarding school leader. Since I was 6, I started to make my way into my bright future, and I used the most dishonest and dirty methods. I blackmailed, lied, looking straight into the eyes of the teachers. The only thing inaccessible to me was fighting, but I didn't really want to. Still, I was a fragile girl, not a brutal man. Thanks to my appearance and developed brain, I became popular with the boys. Even if other kids accused me of different terrible things, the teachers always believed me, without any hesitation. Very soon other kids realized it was no use to mess with me. The cute little girl face, in fact, was a really scary opponent. I mean it. When the 2 high school students who had messed with me got to the police because of me, I just gutted their bags of various bad pills. I was completely left behind. I had my own room, lots of cool toys from my foster parents, nice clothes that I chose from the best Instagram shops. Other kids didn't even have half of what I had. I think my best talent was to negotiate. Yeah, and everyone would give up, seeing a cute little girl. I used it for my own purposes. The only thing that poisoned my life was this terrible thought. I was so wonderful, talented, and sweet, but why was I abandoned by my biological parents? Well, it's obvious that every abandoned kid has a dad and mom somewhere, but where are my parents? I couldn't figure out no matter how hard I tried. My foster parents said I was found as a baby on the porch of the shelter. It was unpleasant to know this, and it was even more painful when I heard other kids saying how wonderful it was to grow up in a family. That's how I decided to try it on my own. I wasn't very good at reading people back then, and an elderly rich couple seemed to me quite a suitable option. Despite the fact that they already had a kid, a nasty-looking kid, who was a couple of years older than me. So, the boarding school administration gave me to them as I asked. They arranged all the documents and I was adopted. But soon I realized this was a kinda scary fairy tale. I didn't want to be Cinderella, especially since I liked villains in fairy tales more. And here, I had to spend my time and talents trying to please these terrible people. As it turned out, they didn't take the orphan out of their kind heart. They just wanted to somehow stand out in front of their neighbors. They saw my foster parents had an adopted kid, whom they showed love and affection. But somehow they didn't see I was kinda a servant to them. My new brother was a worst one for me. He made me bring him things, locked me in my room, blamed me for the broken plates and expensive vases. Of course, my foster parents believed only him, and even my gift of persuasion was no use here. They just didn't care. Anyway, at first, I just snapped. But they scolded me, so I started behaving in a more cunning way. During the next visit to the guardianship authorities, I gave myself bruises on my arms and feet, and then, with tears in my eyes, I told everyone how I was being bullied by my foster parents. Of course, I was immediately taken away from this terrible house, and there was nothing left of the perfect reputation of those people. Well, I had an unforgettable experience. Since then, the dreams of living in a family somehow disappeared from my head. There were a lot of other foster parents trying to adopt me, but I always refused, remembering how my previous foster parents treated me. Well, anyway, it turned out the boarding school was the coolest place for me to stay. Only at 16, I realized I was ready. It was time to get out of this swamp. And that's when the Smiths appeared in my life. I wasn't born yesterday, so as soon as I realized I wanted to try living in a family again, I put all my energy into an active surveillance and studying the biographies of those people wanting to become my new family. I needed the perfect parents. Moderately rich, moderately responsible, and, well, a little bit crazy, because I didn't like boring people. I didn't expect any love from them. I just wanted to live in a normal family where I could get the things I needed. And the Smiths seemed the appropriate candidates for me at first. They had an expensive car. They were impeccably dressed. And another advantage was they wanted to have a teenager in the family, not a toddler. Their gift for me was the money. And this was crucial, because it showed they really respected the freedom of choice. I played my part as a sweet good girl like clockwork. All the boarding school teachers were very happy their nice girl would go now to a good family after that story. They all praised me, showed my awards and academic performance. They told the Smiths how great I was, how smart I was, and anyway, I was just the best of the best. Well, I smiled, lowered my eyes to the floor, blushing, and confirmed how wonderful and obedient I was. And the Smiths loved me. They didn't even talk to other kids. They just asked me if I really wanted to be in their family. I did. So they signed the necessary papers, and just in a couple of hours, they took me home. But I missed one important thing. The Smiths came together to the boarding school, but my previous experience showed me that future guardians took all their family members with them. And I thought, but I failed to check it, that I would be their first and only kid. I had a surprise waiting for me in my new home. 3 other kids. 2 girls my age, with the same naive eyes as mine, and a boy who was a couple of years younger. My new brother and sisters. By the way, the girls were twins, and I understood at once they couldn't be trusted. It was a nightmare. The only thing that comforted me, somehow, was that the 3 of them were adopted kids like me. They'd been adopted by the Smith family not so long ago. The girls had 2 years of experience, and the boy 3. The Smiths' house was large and beautiful, but it somehow turned out that the twins and I had to share a room. Though I knew there were 3 extra bedrooms in the house, not counting the 2 guest rooms that kids weren't allowed to go into. That's where the grandparents stayed if they visited. The issue with my placement was immediately resolved. I wasn't even allowed to say a word. My new dad, Mr. Smith, or Ethan, just dragged an extra bed from somewhere and moved my suitcase to the shared closet. This event took place under my silent hysteria. But with my new clothes and other girlish little things, it wasn't so easy. Mom Jessica looked at my wardrobe, then looked in the girls' closet, nodded at something, and decided that our things would now be shared by all 3 of us. That's when I suddenly wanted to go back to the boarding school. However, the girls who immediately alerted me turned out to be really simple and naive, and happily dumped all their belongings in front of me. Like, take whatever you want. I wanted to scream, and I didn't want to wear anything worn by somebody else. At all. But nobody asked me. My parents were also caught in a trick, but at least I wasn't mistaken in their assessment. On the whole, they didn't really care about the kids. This was another typical story. They tried to improve their social status using orphans. 4 foster kids meant a perfect reputation, and what's more, monetary allowances for Mom Jessica. She turned out to be a business lady, and foster kids greatly reduced the amount of taxes she had to pay. Dad Ethan didn't notice the kids at all. There was only one rule in the house that was always followed. Never go into his workshop. Never ever. I mean it. Dad Ethan was an artist. He created his masterpieces in his workshop studio. By the way, they were quite good as I could judge. But anyway, he didn't care what happened in the rest of the house. Despite all these disadvantages, I can't really say the Smiths were bad parents. No, they did something really. They didn't bully us or force us to do anything we couldn't. They never scolded us. Mom Jessica even managed to pamper us and encourage us to have proper behavior. In some way, they were really the perfect foster parents I wanted for so long. Anyway, all I had to do was follow a few simple rules. Never go into the workshop. Always do your homework. Keep your room clean. Well, and don't make any noise when Mom Jessica is taking a nap on the couch. But this was more like a polite request. I would live happily ever after there, if it weren't for my 3 other relatives. Well, for some reason, they all thought I was their leader, and they all followed me like sheep following a shepherd. It was easy to make friends with them. I just showed them a couple of tricks from our boarding school to have some fun, like breaking the locks and stealing food from the refrigerator unnoticed. I also taught the girls to make perfect braids. And that's it. Now we seem to be friends forever. But I'm used to being alone. I loved solitude, quiet evenings with a book in my hands, and empty space in my room. But these guys just wouldn't leave me alone for a second. My things were always in perfect order, and the girls threw their stuff wherever they wanted, including my half of the room. It was difficult for me to be friends with them, because I always considered my peers stupid and limited, and my new relatives only confirmed my theory, not noticing I didn't want to communicate with them at all. Plus, my parents always reminded me I wasn't alone anymore, as if I had no one letting me forget about it. But the annoying thing was, I couldn't go back to the boarding school, and there was no guarantee the next family wouldn't be worse. But here, everything was perfect on the whole, except for the increased sociability and responsibility. But I just had to adapt and use my talents to the maximum. After a week of living at such a madhouse, with 3 stupid kids and parents who were mistaken for a family, I realized it was time to take things into my own hands. If the parents don't care, and the kids only knew how to look at people with innocent eyes and just nod, it made sense for me to make a plan. I urgently needed to get rid of the extra kids. I wanted to make sure all this stupid crowd of kids would get away from me. I knew this issue wouldn't be solved by itself, so I had to set a goal and go for it. And if I couldn't do anything in a perfect way, I just had to wait and do what was needed. I even knew where to start. William. The younger brother was the weakest link in the system. He was naive enough to fall into my trap, and curious enough for the adults to believe he did everything by himself. I also dared to take a spare room and use my parents' money. Perfect. For me, of course. I only had to wait for the right moment, and evening, Ethan's workshop, and William went there without permission. And I'll have my own room, and maybe even some other bonuses. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell button so that you never miss the next episode.